Hi, in this episode I'll be talking to the author of the Decompression Diver's Bible, Deco for Divers, Mark Powell. Over at BREW, Mark discusses teaching technical diving and authoring some of the must-have diving reference books that are available. We talk about his life as an instructor with TDI and work with the British Diving Safety Group. Do you fancy a brew? Hi Mark, you alright?
Yeah, not too bad. Just trying to keep sane in these weird times.
It's crazy, isn't it? Oh,
yeah.
Have you got plenty of projects on?
Yeah, that's the weird thing. You know, I had no idea I had time to go diving. I've got so much going on that I'm flat out. You just find other things to keep you busy, don't you?
I think that's kind of how I've started this. I thought, well, I've nothing else better to do than sit in my garden. You know, all my work, my admin was all done right at the beginning of March, so I had nothing really to do.
Yeah.
And I started a bit of a YouTube channel, and one of my friends said, why don't you do this? And I've been listening to quite a few podcasts, which kind of went, you know what, I might have something I could talk about or try and pull out of people such as yourself. Really appreciate you taking a bit of time out and coming on, so thanks very much.
No problem.
I take it from your message, tell me if I'm wrong, but as in the one you just sent to say, yeah, I can come on now, the rundown you give me of stuff to talk about, are you quite used to doing podcasts like this and someone perhaps not knowing enough about you or asking the right questions?
No, I've just, I wasn't sure how much you knew, whether you wanted some suggestions. So if you've got your own questions, I'm more than happy to go through those. But if you're short of topics to talk about, then that was all that was.
I like to do so. I have listened to a couple of podcasts where I feel all that's up in front of the presenter is the guest's Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. They've heard of that person's name, but they've no idea who they're actually talking to. So, believe it or not, I have done quite a bit of preparation.
Excellent.
I have read both your books. Well, I'll be honest, I read Deco for Divers properly, cover to cover, but I'll cover that later. And the other one I got for Christmas off my kids, because obviously I liked the first book, and I thought, well, the second book at some point will come in. I got so many books. My bookshelf is equally as big as yours behind you, and I've not read half of them. I just struggle for time, to be fair. It's not through want to learn, it's just struggling for time. But I enjoyed your book, your Deco for Divers, and I did it before I went out to Forteventura with Steve Kirkman. I believe you know him. I don't know how well.
I know, yeah.
And I did the advanced nitrox and decompression procedures course with him out there. Yeah. So everything that I read in your book was a massive foundation for that course.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was hard work doing the theory straight after the dive for the following day, but because I had that foundation, it was perfect for me. So there you go. So welcome to my podcast. Have you got yourself a brew? Are you all sorted?
I've just finished it, actually.
Waiting to come out. So obviously I know who you are in the respect of I've done a bit of research, I've read some of your books and whatnot. But if you want to give just sort of a brief overview of who you are, and then obviously we'll try and pick apart everything that I've done and what you sent to me, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, as an introduction, I'm just a diver. I've been diving since properly since 1987. I learned it at university and just got absolutely hooked. And I've basically been trying to find as many excuses as possible to go diving since then. So initially just for fun, and I started to get into teaching as a way of doing more diving in the mid 90s. Got into a little bit of technical diving as well, and then that really changed in 2004 when I went full time as a diving instructor. So I've been teaching full time since 2004. Combination of technical, recreational, and instructor training, and as well as teaching for myself, I also work part time for SDI, TDI, HQ as well.
Yeah.
In the International Business Group. So just a diver who tries to find as many excuses as possible to go dive in.
What is it you studied at university?
I studied cognitive science, which is, that's usually the reaction I bit. Cognitive science and artificial intelligence,
All right.
which was a combination of computer science, psychology, linguistics, and philosophy. And actually, the psychology and the linguistics bit has come in handy, especially the psychology bit in later life. The rest of it, maybe not quite so much.
No. So, because you sort of say something about that at the beginning of Deco for Divers, don't you? That you're not really a subject matter expert. It's just you've put together quite a lot of notes that you've made over the years to form that book. Did you find it quite a hard write?
Yeah, exactly as you said. You know, I'm not mathematically oriented. I'm not a medical person. So you know, I've come to it very much from the diving point of view, and the book really it's the book I wanted when I started to get into diving, and it didn't exist. And then when I got into teaching, it's the book I wanted to give my students.
Yeah.
And yeah, it didn't exist. So I had to do a lot of research myself, wade through a lot of papers and try and work out exactly what it meant. And I eventually got to the point where I understood it myself, and then got to the point where I could explain it to someone else. I thought, you know, I'd basically put together some notes for my students, and the book grew out of the notes. So in terms of how difficult was it to write, I never set out with the intention of writing the book. Right. I set out with the intention of learning a bit about it myself, then putting some notes together down for my students. And then they kept asking me, you know, is there any more material that goes into a little bit more detail, you know, basically a book that documents everything that you've just said in your lectures. Eventually I thought, well, yeah, I've got all the materials there. So putting it together was a logical next step. Probably took about 4 years in total, from start to finish. I would say, you know, probably about a year or so of pulling together the notes, and then a couple of years really to pull that into a book format. And then the last bit, when I thought I'd finished, the last year of just going through the publication process and getting permission for everything and checking all of the details, all that sort of stuff.
Had you had anything done before? Have you published anything before that?
Not a book. I'd published a couple of articles in previous jobs. I'd published a couple of magazine articles. But no, it was the first book. And I remember saying after I published it, that's it, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to go through that process again.
Well, that's quite an achievement though, because I'd suggest anyone that talks about the top 10 books or books you must have, that rates extremely highly on that list. So, you know, to just not really set out to write a book, but form one, then create it, get it published, and then it be in such high regard, that must be quite overwhelming.
It is quite, it gives me a buzz every time I see it on someone's bookshelf, or every time someone tells me that they've read it. I remember going for my HSC medical a good number of years ago, and I'm there and I'm doing the step test, and I'm facing the doctor's bookcase, you know, it's sort of 6 foot in front of me, and I can see my book on the bookcase. And it just gave me a Did
you go, you seen that book there? That's mine. That's brilliant. Oh. Well, I read one of your articles yesterday, which kind of relates to the book that I said I've been trying to read of late. It was about your divers doing stupid things, or why do divers do stupid things? And something that came to light for me recently was in the late last year. I did the SDI solo divers course. And obviously there's a checklist there before you get in, which me as a normal recreational diver, other than perhaps the BSACs, your own sort of buddy check that you do, or your dive leader's brief as such, I don't have a checklist, and I find that amazingly honest and easy to go through, but you can't really cheat yourself, because you're not going to tick it off unless you've got it. So do you find that checklists are perhaps a really, really good thing for everyone to have as a diver?
I do, yeah. I think checklists can be very, very useful. Now, the only thing I disagree with, you said, you can't tick it off unless you've actually checked it. But lots of people do. So checklists are only useful if you've got the right mentality to go with it. And what you said is exactly the right thing, but a lot of people don't do that. And that's actually one of the point. I teach the SDI solo diver course, and that's one of the points that I really, really stress. The point of a checklist is not to put a tick in that box. The point of a checklist is to check the thing that's listed on there. So when I'm teaching that course, one of the things I have to teach people is how to use a checklist. I remember one perfect example. You remember on that checklist, one of the line items is check all the hoses and make sure there's no damage. So I've got a student and he's got this checklist in front of him. And oh yeah, check all the hoses, quick glance over the hoses, and he ticks off the checklist. And I said to him, are you sure that there's no damage? Oh yeah, I've ticked the box. And I pointed out on one of his hoses there was a big bulge. It may not have been about to go bang on that dive, but within the next couple of days, that hose probably would have gone bang. And he had looked directly at it and hadn't seen it. And I think that's one of the dangers. People look, but they don't see. So the checklist, it's only of value if you slow down and actually check rather than just put the tick in the box. But yeah, I think, checklists are a really important tool. And whether it's as a recreational diver, the buddy check is the sort of classic checklist. And you see the same thing there. The number of times I've seen people say, yeah, my dry suit is here and it's done up, and it isn't. And yet they don't spot it. The buddy doesn't spot it because they've got in the process of going through the process rather than actually looking for the end result.
I quite often, when I'm instructing, would see someone, when they're in quite a nervous stage of their diving setup and they're going through that buddy check and there's no routine, so they're going from top to bottom to left to right and up and down. And I just work nice and slow, top to bottom and left to right, rather than going back and forth and up and down and here, there and everywhere. I find just slow everything down. It's a much easier process then, isn't it? So clearly you'll be an advocate for being either self-sufficient or a solo diver, but there seems to be a lot of argument, whether it be on the internet or just in conversation over a brew in the cafe after a dive or between dives, of solo diving, dangerous. And then you mentioned self-sufficiency, and they kind of bemused, going, well, why would you want to be self-sufficient because you've got your buddy? But I've obviously come across this quite a few times, but maybe you might have a bit to say on that, do you think?
Well, I think it depends on your dive experience and who you're diving with. I mean, if you're diving in a BZAC club and you've got regular buddies that you get to know and you get to trust and they're rock solid, yeah, I can see that point of view. But equally, if you do a lot of traveling, you don't have a regular group of buddies, and you're in a club and you've got some buddies that aren't as good as they should be, then the buddy is not necessarily gonna be able to save you. The buddy system says you've got someone who is similarly qualified, similarly equipped, and is able to rescue you. That's what the buddy system is. And as you said, I teach solo diving, but I also teach buddy diving and team diving. And my point of view is you've got to pick one or the other. I think the really dangerous bit is that, well, you can't dive on your own, so you've got to dive with this guy who you've never met before, has different equipment, different mindsets, might even speak a different language, and you just jump in because just jumping off the boat with someone makes you safe. That's not the buddy system. So, what I always say is, you either dive in the buddy system, which means a proper buddy, or you dive on your own. So what some people say is, solo diving is dangerous. You should never dive on your own, and you're better off with a bad buddy than nobody, which I completely disagree with. I think you're better off with nobody than with a bad buddy. I agree completely. The best option is a good buddy. But whether I'm teaching solo diving or teaching team diving, I always teach that diving with a good buddy is the best option. It's that second best choice is where the contention is. And I would rather dive on my own than dive with a bad buddy.
Definitely agree. I mean, for me, it was more, I was getting into underwater photography, and a few of my friends either didn't want to dive at Cape and Ray during the winter because it was too cold for them, and I was still keen to go. So I could go on my own, or maybe we'd go in as a three. Those two could go and do what they wanted, whilst I would just sat there focused on something for 20 minutes, half an hour, getting cold and taking rubbish photographs. But I was safe in the understanding of what I needed to do or what equipment I needed to have. So it 100% made sense. But then I've watched a few articles or read a few articles or watched a few videos, especially of you talking, where the idea of everyone becoming self-sufficient and maybe even going on the solo divers course to improve their own skill set, you know, the redundancy of having a spare mask or a spare gas supply. You know, I learned so much on that course that I didn't learn in Ocean Diver, I think. So it was quite, for that, I thought it was a cracking course, me.
Yeah, and you know, I will often get students on the course that they don't necessarily want to dive solo. They want to be a better buddy. And being self-reliant, being able to look after yourself actually makes you a better buddy. If you can look after yourself, you then got the ability to also keep an eye on your buddy. But if you've got a problem and all you can do, you know, it's a maximum of your capacity to look after yourself, you can't look after your buddy, then the buddy system breaks down. You know, it's scary the number of times you look at the BZAC incident report and a problem occurs and the buddies get separated. So, you know, they started off as a buddy pair, but they ended up separated. So, you know, you look at the number of cases where an incident causes separation. Not separation causes an incident, but the incident causes separation. Yeah. In that case, the buddy was no benefit whatsoever. So yeah, you know, a solo diver is more able to be of assistance to themselves and then of assistance to their buddy. And solo divers also tend to be a bit more aware of what's going on around them. So ironically, solo divers tend to make better buddies. You know, it's not either or. As I said, you know, I would, on a Saturday I might be teaching someone to dive solo. On a Sunday I'm teaching them to dive as a team, and you know what, the techniques are actually very, very similar.
Yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit on team diving? Because I think certainly in the recreational fields that I might be in, it's not a term that's bandied around too often or explained. So just so, you know, to give the bigger picture.
So I think at one level, team diving and buddy diving, you could think of them as equivalent. So your teammate or your buddy, I think, is interchangeable. At a different level, it is there's a bit more to it, and I think it emphasizes what I was talking about before about the you know, the insta buddy or the renter to buddy. You know, the buddy is the person you jump off the back of the boat with. And I think that's not really what the buddy system is meant to be. So team diving is more about deciding on the dive, planning the dive, coordinating everything together, including jumping off the boat and doing the dive. So making sure you've got the same gases. You know, if one person turns up with air and the other one's got nitrox, then all of a sudden you can't really call them a buddy team because they've got different gases. No stop dives, no stop time is going to be different. So team diving is sort of what buddy diving should be. And then the other aspect of it is that team diving can be more than just one person. So many technical diving agencies say that the ideal team is a team of three. Some agencies insist on two, but many agencies say that three is actually better. In an emergency, you've got an extra pair of hands, you've got an extra pair of eyes, and importantly, you've got an extra brain. So the third person can coordinate, can plan how you're going to ascend, can take charge of the situation. So yeah, team diving is a little bit of a vague term. You know, as I said, at one level, it's just proper buddy diving.
I think I first came across it listening to people talk, it might be Sea Shepherd, but those are doing Ghost Nets UK and stuff, that they'll dive in a 3. So you've got 2 working on the nets and 1 sort of step back a little bit to observe have better situational awareness, see what's going on, and be able to go and assist anyone that might have a bit of a problem or whatever. And then I think that's a cracking idea, really, isn't it? That you can just have that overview and overwatch to make sure everything is going to plan, and be watching the time rather than getting tax fixated. Is that the right word? Fixated. I noticed you talked about keeping warm. Can't exactly remember where I saw it, but you wrote something about keeping warm as technical divers. It's something that they really need to specialise because of the amount of time at depth, and then still on decompression stops and stuff. Now, me, I struggle with a cold all the time. I'm horrendous for it. So you can either have a really big pair of gloves and you can't do anything with them, but your hands are warm enough. And I've listened to Andy Torbit talk quite a bit, and he's talking about wearing three hoods, 9 pairs of gloves. So your hands are this big and you can't do anything. Have you got any top tips that you could pass on to me alone? Not anybody else that's listening, just me.
I think, again, it comes down to equipment. What's the quote from Fourth Element? There's no such thing as a cold dive, just insufficient equipment. And I think that's the first point. I mean, you'll see some divers that they have one undersuit and they wear it all the way through the year. If you're wearing the same undersuit all the way through the year, then you're going to have problems. You're either going to be too hot in the summer or too cold in the winter. So I've got a whole range of undersuits. In fact, you see some of them hang up behind me. There are times when I am diving with just a base layer on, just something like a Xerotherm base layer, and that's perfectly warm enough. And there are other times where I've got multiple layers. I think, as you mentioned, for decompression diving, for technical diving, it's even more of an issue because the dives tend to be longer. And if you do get cold, you can't just say, I've had enough of this, I want to go up. If you've got an hour of decompression, you've got to do that hour of decompression. So I think the point is that technical divers think about this a lot more. Layering is my number one suggestion. Have multiple layers, and then pick the right amount of layers for the temperature and the exposure. So if it's cold water but you're only doing a 20-minute dive, then that might be one set of layers. If you are in the same temperature but you're going to be doing a 2-hour dive, obviously you're going to need a much more insulation. And I've mentioned Fourth Element already, but I think Fourth Element are just an amazing company, just partly because of the products and partly because of the ethos of the company.
Yeah, their ethics are really good, aren't they?
They're a fantastic company to work with. So Fourth Element, and I've got some fantastic products. So as I said, I might go from the Xerotherm, which is their thinnest, almost their thinnest base layer, all the way up to I've recently been, just before all of this COVID stuff, last year I was testing out their new Halo Air, which is fantastic. Fourth Element, I've done a couple of suits in the past designed to be really warm, but then they've needed a lot of buoyancy to sink them. The Sub-Zero they did probably going back about 10 years ago. Fantastic suit, really warm, but you needed 10
ton weight
to sink it. The Halo was better, but now the Halo Air is really quite incredible. Great suit, and very warm, but still buoyancy wise, I compare it with my my Arctic. So undersuits, and then the other two pieces of the puzzle is a P valve. I find a P valve makes a huge difference because your body wants to get rid of that liquid. When you get cold, it wants to get rid of it. So having a P valve means that that's no longer a problem. And also it means you can chug down a mug of tea just before you jump in and give yourself a little bit of a head start.
I'm murder for that. Hence, I bought a P valve straight away as soon as I got my best dry suit. Get us one of them. Best thing ever.
Oh yeah, it does completely change your outlook on things. And then the other one, dry gloves. I resisted for a long time. I tried to avoid going to dry gloves, and partly because they were so fiddly and unreliable. And then as the technology got better, a couple of years ago, I gave in and went to dry gloves. And a good pair of dry gloves, if you've got a reliable pair that are not going to leak, dry gloves make such a huge difference. It really does. Having cold hands is miserable and potentially dangerous as well. If you can't use your hands, then
turn a valve off or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So the combination of those two things together is what makes.
What's your thoughts on these sort of heated suits that you can get? Have you got much?
I've tried a few, and I think if you're doing long dives under ice, then I think that's almost the only option to do that safely. That's not the sort of diving I tend to do. Wreck diving is my interest. So I might be doing long dives in the sea, but not under ice. But for cave diving, that sort of diving, that's an option. My big worry with those is, well, there's two really. One is you just get too used to it. I know people that have those and they put them on the whole time, and then when it gets really cold, you've then lost the benefit. It's I've got flashbacks to being a kid when my mother said, don't wear your coat on in the house, otherwise you won't feel the benefit when you go outside.
Whose mum do you reckon actually coined that phrase, "You'll not feel the benefit"? Because everybody knows that saying, don't they? Somebody's mum actually must have coined that phrase at one point.
I think it's just in their DNA. All mums just learn that phrase from. I think you get used to it, and then the other big problem I've got is that what if the heating vest fails? Then you're back to square one.
That's it. You could have gone in with less layers overall, couldn't you? Because I can get 40 degrees off this, and then your battery runs out, or it floods, or
exactly. Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said about the batteries getting wet as well in salt water, isn't there? The lithium ion? They don't like salt water so much, do they?
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to have a connection through the suit, because having the battery inside has got disadvantages. So if you've got a connection through the suit, then there's that whole connection issue, rusty, breaking cables. So I'm lucky that the sort of dives I do don't demand that level. But I know divers that dive with not just heated suits, but they've got heated gloves. They're not just dry gloves, but heated gloves, heated boots as well. That is a step too far even for me.
Well, that brings me nicely on, because I read in that same article about you leaving your thumb loops of your undersuit through your cuffs to allow the equalization of your dry gloves. Now, I wonder, you'll probably be able to answer this straight away, I reckon. Do you reckon that's why I'm getting so cold? Because I'm not leaving that to equalize. Perhaps I'm getting a bit of squeeze in my gloves, which reduces the air that's in the underglove, which in turn reduces the actual thermal layering of that. Is that probably why I'm struggling?
Could be, yeah. If you're not getting, if you don't have air in the hands, then you lose out the insulation, because it's the air that is providing the insulation, not just the glove itself. I mean, obviously, you can if you then get some air into the glove when you come back up and it can't escape, you get the balloon hands. So I always found that below a certain depth, it just got too painful. You get that squeeze in the hands. Some systems come with a little straw, or some divers carry a little straw around with them to put through. But there's always the danger of losing those. So as long as you've got thin thumb loops, I find they work really well. And then if the glove does leak, you don't get a huge flood. If you've got a tube connecting it up and it leaks, then it's just going to run straight through. But the thumb loops, yes, it will wick a little bit of water in, but it's not going to be
horrendous, though, is it?
Too bad, yeah.
No. So what current projects are you working on that you can tell us about anyway, that are not secret?
Current project is a new shed, some decking, and a pergola.
Wow.
My definition of projects has definitely changed in the last couple of months. The last couple of months with all the COVID stuff, most of my projects have been dry based. I've been working along with a number of the other agencies on guidelines for the British Diving Safety Group for how we get back safely diving. I've always been involved in some of the safety committees, things like the British Standards Institute, the EN and ISO standards. So last week spent a lot of time talking about BREW, their training standards. So a lot of the sort of the stuff that goes on in the background. And then trying to work out what I'm going to do to get my courses back up and running. I think one of the nice things, or one of the positives of this COVID-19 thing is it's made us rethink how we do things. So I've been doing some training online, some Zoom calls, and in many ways, I think there are some advantages to doing that. We already use online training a lot. And so, part of what I've been doing is restructuring the way I teach my courses to try and take the best out of what we're doing now and apply that. So, trying to keep the business running is the first one. It's frustrating because I've got customers, I've got people coming to me saying, I do want to do some courses. When can I book it up? And the answer is, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how the world is going to look. But in terms of diving projects, one of the things that I was hoping to do this year was get back out to do HMS Hermes.
Sri Lanka.
In Sri Lanka, In fact, early June is about the best time to do the Hermes. So it would literally have been about now. And to make it even worse, a friend of mine who runs the dive center out there, I think it was yesterday, sent me a picture of him being circled by a blue whale while he was doing Deco after the
wow, that is amazing, isn't it?
That is pretty much that ticks all the boxes. So I think the Hermes is fairly high up on the list. I've got some stuff that I'm looking at doing in Sweden over the next couple of months, and then the big one is bikini. I was planning on going over to bikini next year, and still fingers crossed that's gonna happen. We're gonna do a trip out there, dive the wrecks that were sunk as part of the nuclear testing in Bikini Atoll. So really looking forward to that. It's I did truck a couple of years ago, and that was one of my top 10 lists. And then after that, after truck and the Britannic, then bikini really is the only one left on the bucket list.
That's pretty much a diver's bucket list ticked off in one conversation. Who talks about blue whales now? Nobody. But look, a blue whale, that's flipping amazing.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome. I mean, they get blue whales off Sri Lanka fairly regularly, and you can do these sort of whale trips, but it's normally not the same time as the best time to dive the Hermes. So to get the two together is just absolutely incredible. So
what started your love for the Hermes? That was obviously genuinely was my next question. But how did you go about discovering that and make it quite a bit of your life really now? You're doing quite a lot of research on it and documenting of it, aren't you?
Yeah, well, my interest in diving has always been primarily driven by interest in wrecks. Being a a UK diver, we are so lucky. We've got all of the First and Second World War wrecks. You've got all the cargo wrecks. You know, we're fortunate in being on an island and having a habit of starting wars with people. So, you know, almost from my first dive, it was all about wreck diving, and the history of wrecks, the history behind it has always appealed to me. So for me, you know, a genuine wreck rather than an artificial or custom sunk wreck has got much more interest to me. So anything that's got a really interesting history to it is fascinating to me. So my link with the Hermes goes back to almost 10 years now, and the Hermes, as I said, is off Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka had a civil war that went on for, I think, something like 30 years in total. So the Hermes was completely undivable for a long period of time. And just as the civil war was coming to an end, I was approached about leading a team out there to in effect rediscover and republicize the Hermes. We didn't discover it, you know, like everything, same as the Britannic. You know, Cousteau was there before us, so we didn't rediscover it, or we didn't discover it, but the knowledge about it, the awareness of it had disappeared. And it's got an amazing story. It was the first ship that was specifically built as an aircraft carrier. So others had been converted into aircraft carriers, but it was the first ship that was specifically sunk as an aircraft carrier. And it was sunk by the Japanese in an attack on Sri Lanka in what Churchill called the most dangerous point of the war, because if they'd carried on and actually invaded Sri Lanka, that would have been a perfect beachhead on to then go on to invade India.
Right.
So it's got this huge history behind it. Very few Westerners had ever dived it. So we went out in 2011 to dive it, and just fantastic wreck. The history, but also the wreck itself, the life being just off the coast of Sri Lanka. It's just an amazing wreck. And the Sri Lanka itself is an amazing country, fantastic people, so much variation, you know, history. So yeah, it was just an incredible trip. And then I went back the following year, and I've been back 4 or 5 times since.
It's not too deep, is it really? Like, is it around 50, 55 meters?
Yeah, 53 right? to the seabed, and it stands up just short of 10 meters. So about 45 to 48 is
it's on its side.
Point. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's on the bow is on its side, and then towards the stern, it's almost twisted over, so the stern is almost upside down.
All right.
But still very accessible, and it's. There are certain areas where it's very easy to get inside and explore inside.
Yeah.
And then there's other areas where it's really quite hairy. You know, you're multiple decks down, very dark and stilty, and only for specifically trained wreck penetration divers with good line laying skills. But yeah, fantastic wreck, and because it wasn't dived for so long, you know, everything is in place. There's the ammunition all piled up next to the guns, ready to be fired.
Awesome.
You know, light bulbs still in place.
Really?
Just unbelievable. All the instruments are still there in the control tower. Yeah, it's incredible dive.
Awesome. So I've kind of, through my research, and it seems that you do quite a bit of research yourself to try and find undiscovered wrecks. Is that right?
Yeah, not as much in the last couple of years as in the past, but certainly in the past that was we used to do a lot of that, and a lot around the UK. I used to run a regular week out of Weymouth, and we also did it out of other places, because one of the things that, you know, I've been going down to to Weymouth pretty much since I started diving, and it struck me that there were still wrecks that I hadn't dived, and still wrecks that were unidentified.
Yeah.
So we used to, do a couple of rec weeks, sometimes a couple per year, and we'd go down and try and find a mystery. And sometimes, these are not necessarily unknown wrecks. They've been identified. They might have been dived many, many times before, but nobody knows the exact identification. Or in some cases, there were plenty of wrecks out of Weymouth which had a name associated with them, but everybody knew that wasn't the right name.
Right.
It couldn't be, because that ship had 3 boilers, whereas the wreck's only got 1, or vice versa. So we'd pick a couple of wrecks that were either really good wrecks that had a bit of a story behind them, or had a mystery behind them, and try and find as much information, use some surveying techniques, do a bit of research. And actually my role more was sort of coordinate it. I was never the one in the public records office with my nose in a book. But I was good at getting that information, getting the problems that those guys wanted solving, and then being the blunt instrument, getting a couple of guys to go out and look, measure this, find out whether it was this type or that type. So yeah, we used to do a lot of that. I'm lucky now in that I get asked to do a lot of those things. I get asked by a lot of dive centers, we've got this wreck, we've got this unidentified wreck, or we've got this deep wreck. Are you interested in coming and diving it? And
That's good. I think because as a newer diver, I've only been diving about 4 or 5 years now. But anyone new coming into the sport, much like you said before about Jack Cousteau, he's probably dived that double-decker bus at Endac, hasn't he? He's been on every wreck that anyone talks about. He found it or he's dived it. So to be an underwater explorer kind of seems a bit hard to become that. But actually, we're all pushing our own boundaries every day, doing something new, just because someone else has been there before. But if you wanted to get into that, going finding what may not have been discovered or may not have been actually, the right name for it be found. It's been logged that it's there. Have you got a couple of top tips, perhaps, for somebody, as me, that maybe wanted to get into locating or discovering new wrecks?
So probably the best tip is talk to your local dive boat operators.
Yeah.
Because most dive boat operators have got a book of all the marks that they often will get them off fishermen, and they know there's something there, but they've never put anyone on there, because most of the time, you say you're interested in getting into that, and there are a number of people who are interested, but actually a lot of divers, they want to go out to the known wrecks. They want to go to the guaranteed wrecks. And when you say, we're going to do a week's diving, and we may end up diving for 5 or 6 days on a pile of rocks. It may be that this mark that we've got is actually just a big rock. And then they go, oh, well, in that case, maybe, can we go and dive the Salsette instead, or, another well-known wreck in that area. So it actually takes quite a lot of determination to find a group of people that want to go out and do that exploratory stuff. I would reckon that almost every dive boat skipper has got at least one little pet project that he wants to put divers on. Talk to the dive boat skippers, and if you can get a group of divers who have got that interest, then that you may well find that there is these things, these points that people do want to go and look at, but they can't get enough divers.
I often hear when we go to the club meets on a Wednesday night, and some people say, "Oh yeah, I love to do some research and find these," and kind of try and pick the bones of it. And sometimes they don't actually do it; they just like to talk about it. But I'd like nothing more than that. I'm not saying I've dived every wreck off Anglesey that I'd like to dive, but I think that would be much more adventurous to be going. We might actually find something that nobody's been on yet. That'd be, quite cool, that, wouldn't it?
And in terms of bucket list, you mentioned it earlier. yes, truck, Britannic, Bikini, Hermes, they're fantastic, but I get just as interested diving on an unknown wreck or an unidentified wreck. When we were diving the Hermes, on one of the dives, the boat skipper said, we've got, exactly as I just said, we've got a potential mark. When the fisherman has told us about it, it might be one of the wrecks that was sunk along with the Hermes. And he gave everyone the option. Everybody said, we'll dive the Hermes again. We'll do one more dive on the Hermes. Apart from me, I went and we discovered the British Sergeant, which is one of the wrecks that was sunk along with the Hermes. And you can't beat the feeling of dropping down onto a wreck, working out what it is, and thinking, I've put a pin in on the map. Now
you've beat Jacques Cousteau. That's what you've done.
Exactly.
You've beat Jacques Cousteau there. Brilliant. So what's been your hardest diving obstacle to overcome?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I guess probably my the hardest obstacle, I think, thinking back to not so much when I started diving, but mid 90s, early 2000s, it was just finding enough time to go diving. For me, the idea of not diving for months on end, I hated that idea. So struggling to find enough dives, to find enough people to go diving with. Basically, I solved that problem by turning it into my job. So now I've got no excuse for not diving as regularly as possible. And I genuinely believe I've got the best job in the world. I get people asking me to go this place or that place and go diving. My last dive was in Dahab before all of this kicked off, and I was with a group of divers, and you mentioned it earlier. We were doing a Sea Shepherd ghost net recovery course, and they said, we could put in a net to simulate all of cutting and the right procedures, but we actually know of one. There's a real one just off. We could go and find this net, bring it back, and things like that. Just that put a huge smile on my face. We were only in maybe 10 meters, but we were recovering a net off a reef just off Dahab, and that just, to me, that puts a smile on my face every time I go and do something like that. So finding enough opportunity to go diving, that was my biggest problem, and I think I've solved that now. up until I got locked in my office.
How was the transition from going, let's say, a recreational technical diver, perhaps, so just doing it as a sport, as a hobby, then to transfer that into a full-time job? Was that quite good?
So for me, it was a very, very gradual process. So getting into technical diving, I never made the decision that, right, I'm going to become a technical diver. The group of divers that I was diving with, we just gradually, over probably a 6 or 7 year period, just gradually got deeper and deeper. I remember when we thought 35 meters was a deep dive, and that was a dive that we would build up to after a week's diving. We did very gradually over a period of time, got a bit deeper, and then we had to start doing Deco diving because we were spending longer. And then I think probably the point at which we thought, okay, now we're doing something a little bit different, was when we started using stage cylinders and decompression gases. But yeah, so the first couple of years of Deco diving and 50-meter dives, we didn't think we were doing anything other than slightly more adventurous diving. And even after that, then I started teaching technical diving. Mainly because many of the divers that I'd been diving with had sort of dropped out, weren't as interested in diving anymore, or didn't want to go do the deeper dives. So I really started diving still as teaching technical diving as a hobby to be able to keep a steady flow of dive buddies, essentially. And that's, you know, when you scrape it away, that is still really what I do. I teach people so that I've got people to dive with in the future. I teach people to do technical diving in the way that I want my buddies to do technical diving. So all the way up to the mid 2000s, it was it was just a hobby. And I remember actually the point at which I made the decision, or where the seed was planted. I was doing, I think it was my advanced trimix course, and we were diving off a boat in the channel, and my instructor, who's still actively teaching, I remember him saying, I'm a cave diver, really. This is I teach this sort of diving, diving, just to earn money to go cave diving. And I thought, you are nuts. You are absolutely nuts. This is the best job in the world. I would love to do this. And I think that's where the seed was planted. And yeah, in 2004, I had an opportunity to be able to go full time, and never looked back.
That's a good sort of way of looking at it. Because I when I had the opportunity to become an instructor through being in the army, I kind of thought, I just want to go diving. I don't want to be in the 10 meters, and faffing around, for days on end on expeditions to wild places in the world. That you want to be out looking at what's going on rather than looking at your student and kind of teaching them. But to think of, well, you can progress that person, so you've got someone else to dive with. Phenomenal idea. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. A lot of people get into being a dive instructor because they like diving. And what I didn't mention is that, yes, even though I love diving, I love teaching as well. I really get a buzz out to seeing people develop. And it doesn't matter what level it is. I still love teaching in open water, because that smile you get on someone's face when you take them in for their first dive is absolutely fantastic. I love teaching tech stuff, but you never get to see people's first smile after a tech dive. So yeah, I think if you want to become an instructor to get more diving, you will be disappointed. You will get fed up very, very quickly. I spend a lot of time at NDAC or Vobster, and I'll go there every single time, and I'll get something different out of it, not because of the dive, but because of the student. So yeah, that's something I think a lot of divers forget. They get into being an instructor because they like diving, and they lose the passion. And I think that's really bad, because then you lose the passion for your hobby. But also, if you don't have that passion, you're not going to pass it on to someone else. And if you don't want to be there, the student's going to pick up on that very, very quickly. So that's one of the other projects I've been working on through this lockdown thing. Is we've set up a Facebook group for diving instructors to promote better teaching and learning skills. Many diving instructors don't know that much about how to become an instructor. They don't know a lot of the theory about how we learn, some of the latest research. So in the same way as I had to learn about Deco theory, I've also had to learn about teaching theory, and the Facebook group is to try and spread some of that knowledge and develop the teaching skills. So diving educators, it's called. So anyone else who's passionate about teaching.
A lot to be said about the psychology, isn't there, and the sociology behind a lot of the things that we do. It's not just going through the motions of take this out, put that one in, check this, check that. It's the question and answer behind it all.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the old school of I'll do something, I'll demonstrate it, I'll get you to do it. There are times when that works, but there's a whole range of times when that's not the best solution. There's a whole range of other ways of teaching. So this group is a way of instructors discussing that, bring in research from other areas, sharing their interests.
Yeah, it's cracking. When I did my SciMark course a couple of years ago with Gary Dallas, the first day, the theory that he went through and the psyche of a diver, as he calls it, I remember coming home, and I've said this a few times on a few other episodes, where I got home and my head's just bewildered with, why do you usually do it like that? And I'm like, because that's how I was taught. Have you thought about it doing it like this? No, I haven't, but let's have a look. And just like that's such an amass of changing you, not so much bad habits, but maybe doing things slightly wrong, or you could think about it doing it a different way, which makes it so much easier. So I think to get on a forum like that where you can share that information, because quite often, do you not find that people with information will keep hold of it because it's almost like power for them in some respects, and rather than sharing it out, because it's yours to share, isn't it? And I think there's a lot more to gravitas and power in being able to share that. I think you're a much more approachable character if you can, and you'll certainly reap the rewards like you must have through writing your books and being able to come on podcasts and do talks that you do for different, people want to employ you to be their instructor now for that
Exactly,
reason.
Yeah, I think the sharing information is the basis of being an instructor, but there's a lot more to it than that. So I've done a couple of podcasts about Deco theory, and done some presentations about it, but there's a whole lot more that people can pick up when they talk one-on-one rather than just doing a presentation. So yeah, it's a good way of getting some knowledge out there, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to give everything away and that's it. There's no point doing the courses.
No.
So yeah, I think sharing knowledge is a very positive thing. And the one thing that you can't do in a podcast is demo diving skills. So if I put all the knowledge out there, and then when students come to me, all we've got left to do is focus on the in-water stuff, then I'm happy with that. The more time I spend in the water with the student, the better.
What's your student instructor ratio for you? What's your ideal?
So for most of the courses, most of the technical courses, it's a maximum of 4. Ideally, though, for me, 2 or 3 is the ideal number. I don't like teaching one-to-one. A lot of people they call me up and say, I want to book you for a one-to-one course, and I don't care how much it costs. I want to book you one-to-one, and I try and put them off, because how do you teach someone teamwork? And in the TDI courses, teamwork is either the number 1 or the number 2 skill. Buoyancy and teamwork is always the first 2 skills. How do I teach teamwork when it's just you? So if it's one-to-one, then am I their buddy or am I their instructor? So I much prefer to have students in a buddy pair or in a team of 3, and then I can give them feedback on their buddy skills. So 2 works well. 3 comes back to the conversation we were having before about in many ways 3 is a better better solution. So 3 is I think is the ideal number. It gives you it's actually more of a challenge. It's easier to learn to dive in a 2 than it is to dive in a 3. So it gives you more. 3 gives you more of a challenge. It allows you to show off any gaps in your skills. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it is a business. So 2 students is less money than 3 students.
Yeah.
So yes, 4 would be more, but I think the 3 is the sweet spot.
I suppose it'd be good if those 3 were 3 that dived regularly as a 3, as opposed to you just have 3 people ring up and all want the same date. They're not going to pull as much out of that course as if they're all going to go away and live in the same area and dive the same dive sites together, are they? So
exactly, yeah. And mind you saying that, a lot of times I've had 3 individuals come on a course individually and leave as a team, because if they've just spent 4 or 5 days diving together, going through a lot of potentially stressful situations, learning how to be a team, learning to trust each other, It's a waste to lose that. And so I often find that if they're three divers that don't have a ready-made team, they often leave as a team. And lots of my students stay in contact and dive together as a team.
So I've been asked. So I put a question out on my Instagram yesterday to say to anyone who follows me that I was interviewing you today, and see if anyone had any questions, and I'd drop them like a little name check so they feel all happy and whatever. So I've got this one from a guy called Dom Mirror Photography. I don't know whether you know him, but he says, how do Deco models change as we as divers get older? And I think he's in the 50+ set from what he wrote.
Mm-hmm. The short answer is they don't. There's, when you look at a set of Deco tables, or when you use your dive computer, there's nowhere where you input your age.
No.
The models are really bad at taking into account our age. The Deco models don't change, but we do. As you get older, your body changes, and there is definitely more risk to older divers from DCI. Saying that, though, I think it's a fairly small risk. I don't think it's an order of magnitude change. I think the bigger risk for older divers is just general health issues. You look at the BZAC incident report and separate all the fatalities out by age, and it makes for scary reading.
Yeah.
We could get rid of almost all the fatalities in UK diving if we stopped people diving if they're over 50. Now, I'm not suggesting that for 1 minute, because I'm just about in that age group. It's most of the fatalities are not down to poor training or bad equipment or bad decisions. Some are, definitely.
Yeah.
It does happen. But a lot of them are down to medical issues. So I think people being honest about their level of health and fitness is absolutely critical. And maybe scaling it back, or at the very least being honest. One of the things that I think is absolutely unforgivable is that there are people that know they've got medical conditions and they lie on their self-cert forms.
Yeah.
For me, if I have a student, if I find out they've lied on their self-cert forms, I will not train them again. That is the end of the road. One, it shows the wrong mentality, but two, it's putting me at risk. If somebody has a medical incident, because of a medical condition that they've had on a course, I get the HSC down on me, I'll get, it'll be a nightmare. And if it's because of something I've done, then that's perfectly acceptable. If it's because someone has lied on a form, they know they've got a medical condition that increases their risk and they've done it. I think that's unforgivable. So be honest about your fitness levels, keep fit. But if you're not as fit as you'd like to be, scale back on the diving. You don't have to be doing 100-meter Deco diving if you're not up to that level of fitness.
Having just turned 40 during the lockdown, I've noticed massively, not only maybe in the afternoon, early evening, I might be having a beer. I'm certainly not doing half the exercise I used to do 5 or 6 years ago. Fortunately, I haven't developed too much of a tummy just yet, but just the motivation to get up now and go and do a little bit of training, it's harder and harder. And then consuming myself with all YouTube and everything else that's going on. Every night this week I've got an interview such as this. So I'm like, where do you find the time? But you can make time. It's just you need to fall back in the habit of having that 1 hour just set off. Exactly. I do agree that fitness is a big importance in diving, because you see so often on the dive site there's people that are clearly not fit enough. You wouldn't be able to expect them to drag you out, or you wouldn't want to drag them out either, would you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think especially as an instructor, you've got a duty of care to your students. So in the UK, any professional instructor has to have a medical every year, has to have an HSE medical. And I've got no problem at all with that. You know, people are putting their lives in my hand. I've got to be fit enough to be able to rescue them in case of an emergency. You know, I think that should be applied to all instructors. There should be some level of fitness or medical assessment every year. I think that would be a positive thing.
I mean, the Harvard step test isn't really the hardest thing to pass.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't think, but you can't lie on that spirometer, can you? Or the peak flow. You either can or you can't do that. I know there's a technique to it. The last one I did, the nurse that was doing it, I said, "Is there a knack to this?" And he talked me through it, and I absolutely romped home. But I couldn't do it before that because there's a skill, isn't there, involved? But I couldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't had that lung volume or whatever. So it was quite good.
Yeah, I think you used the key word as well earlier. Make it a habit. I mean, I consider it to be part of my job. Staying fit is part of my job. I'm lucky. I live in the Forest of Dean, so going out running around the forest is not a great hardship. But it's a part of my job, and I schedule time to do it. And make it a habit. Schedule time to do it. And I think the other key thing about exercise is find something you like. You know, I know people that say, "Oh, I hate running." A friend of mine hates running, but fine. He's got a mountain bike, so he'll go out and do 20 miles a day on his mountain bike, and he loves it. So if you find something that you enjoy doing, then it's not hard work.
No, I used to love running, but through injury now, I've been told, don't run. You know, I can run for a bus, I can run a bath, but that's it. I really shouldn't be running. But I mean, we go out on our mountain bikes every Sunday, me and my wife. She's out most mornings. I just don't find it ticks that same box. I can't get that mental escape that running used to get for me. You know, just plug your earphones in, put some decent music on, or even a podcast. I'm listening to them all the time at the minute.
Yeah.
But I just can't find that release. And I think that's where I'm lacking in that motivation. So I'm hoping to have another guy on next week. I'm just still waiting for the confirmation. But he's Andy Torbett's fitness trainer. And I'm hoping he can inspire me a little bit to find something that I just need, that inspiration, and I'm really lacking in it at the minute. And it's kind of a down point for me because I'm used to being fit and not being stiff, and I can reach my toes, you know, on my boots to tie them and stuff like that. Excuse me. So what inspires you in diving, that is, obviously?
I think, that's a really interesting question. I think my students, like I was saying earlier, I still get a huge buzz out of seeing my students. It's one of the reasons why I structure the way I do my business specifically. I will bend over backwards for students who want to come and learn. I don't do the walking off the street for a try dive stuff, because I've seen that you get the people who don't really want to be there. They're dragged in by their other halves. They're doing it just because it's to tick an experience box. That's not the sort of divers I want to teach. You know, there are schools that do that really well and are very good at doing that, but I want to teach divers. Again, it comes back to what I was saying before. At the back of my mind, even on an open water course, I'm thinking, how long is it before this person is going to be coming out on the boat with us and come diving with us? My students, as long as I've still got enthusiastic students, I'll get up and go to NDAC or Vobster or any of the inland dive sites with a smile on my face.
Nice. How long do you think you'll be able to get in? How long do you think it'll be before you'll be able to get back in the water? The kind of diving you like doing?
Well, some of the inland sites are opening up already. I think Raysbury started today, and then most of the other inland sites are opening up over the next couple of weeks. In terms of going out and doing some wreck diving, at the moment, it looks like the advice from the government is that charter boats are a no-no. So private boats can go out.
Right.
but charter boats not at the moment. A few did start up, but I think it's going to be another couple of months. And also, the advice that we've been giving everyone is build back up, take it easy. I think this is the longest I've been out of the water for, I can't remember how long. You know, I had my appendix out and I was back in the water faster than this.
Yeah.
So, you know, my first couple of dives are going to be shallow. Let's just remember how to do all this type of
go through your skills
dives.
and drills, make sure everything's where it was and you can do it. Yeah. Is there a new addition to your boot?
Yeah, so that's one of the other things that I've been working on. The thing with Deco theory is that up until a couple of years ago, I was saying there's no real change. There's no, nothing's come up. This last couple of years, there's this whole controversy about deep stops. And so, yeah, I will be putting together a new version at some point to take that into account. Probably not quite yet, because there's this whole controversy and no one knows what the answer is. So, yeah, writing a book saying we don't know what the answer is, it's probably not going to be that helpful. No. It's funny, actually, when the whole thing about deep stops kicked off, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to go back and rewrite it. And I went back and I looked at what I'd actually written. And the conclusion is you've got to balance out stopping too deep and stopping too shallow. You've got to balance out the on-gassing at depth versus the bubble formation, which is still exactly where we are. At the time I wrote that, we didn't know what the right balance was, and we still don't know what the right balance is. So yeah, there will be an update to that, but I think it'll still be a year or so off until we get a bit more evidence and conclusions as to what we should be doing.
I think it's fair to say you're mostly known, other than for instructing, but for the books that you've written for Deco for divers. But obviously you've got the other one, Technical Diving and Introduction. You know, is this a great starter for someone who's progressing that way? Or is it more of a manual for someone who's already sort of into technical diving?
No, well, it was really written for those people getting into technical diving, wanted to find out about technical diving, because again, I suppose similar to Deco for divers, I saw that there was a gap. If you are a recreational diver and you want to get into technical diving and you want to buy a book that goes into it, what do you buy? You know, when I started, Rob Palmer's book was the guide to technical diving, but that now is very, very dated. You've got Kevin Gurr's book, which is great, but far, far too detailed for someone getting into technical diving. And then Jared Jablonski's book, Fundamentals of Better Diving, it just deals with one very specific approach to technical diving. So there isn't an overall introduction. So that's what I wanted to write, something that laid out all the different options. So, for example, you know, there's sections in there about manifolded twin sets versus independent twin sets. You know, all the different options. And the other thing I really wanted to cover in there, and you touched on it earlier, I wanted to get away from this. I do that because my instructor told me to do that. That winds me up. If someone can give me a good reason why they do it, fantastic. But because my instructor said we should do it is not a good reason. So what I wanted to do in each of the sections, whenever we're talking about what we do as technical divers, I want to explain why we do it, so people can understand. And if they want to make a different decision, if they want to do something different, they can, because they understand the principles behind it. So yeah, it's aimed more at the diver getting into it. But the other thing is that many instructors don't know why they teach something. They teach it because their instructor trainer taught them to do that. So the other audience was, you know, for instructors to get a little bit of a background into why we do the things that we do.
I always struggled as an apprentice because I wanted to know the reason why we did something that way. There's always a reason, but quite often, like you said, nobody even knows that was how they were taught. And he was taught that way, and the person who taught him was taught that way, and probably nobody even knows. We just do it like that because that's how we do it. And
exactly.
I've been on. I mean, I was only taught twin set one particular way, and I've been on so many dive boats now around the UK, and I've seen so many different setups. And I have to sort of tailor my approach to say, why do you do it like that, without coming across as a little bit arrogant, going, what are you doing like that for? Because it's not. You need to understand why. Because maybe there's a reason that's actually really practical for that person, but wouldn't be right for me, perhaps. So absolutely. I like that, and I do promise I will read your book, your second book.
I will be asking you questions later.
Oh my word! Right, I'll go and get some dinner then, and thanks very much. I really do appreciate you sharing your time with it, and surely see you around at some point. Nice
enjoyable.
One. Take it easy.
Right. Take care.
So that brings to an end episode 11 with Mark Powell. Links to all the things we discussed are in the podcast notes, and my guest on episode 12 is Sarah Richard, the founder of the Girls That Scuba Network. She chats about how she has tried to empower women in what to some can seem to be a male-dominated sport. You've been listening to Are You a Scuba Diver? Fancy a Brew podcast with me, Andy the Northern Diver. You can find more scuba-related content on my YouTube channel, and the link is in the podcast notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review. If there's someone or something you'd like us to discuss, let us know via our Facebook page. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next one.